theMAAK is a design-led architecture studio based in Cape Town, focusing on public buildings and public space making in all sorts of scale for positive impact. And what does it mean? It means that their projects involve rigorous community engagement and skill development through the act of making buildings. The studio started in 2016 by Ashleigh, Killa and Melvill as their principals, and they see spaces as grounds for providing opportunities for all of us to better connect and learn across many social, cultural, and racial boundaries. Today, the topic is making meaning, where we will talk about their love for materials and the process of making, collaborations, community, and impact across skills. So Ashleigh, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having us, and thanks for getting in touch. It's a privilege.
Cool. Yeah, why don't you tell us more about theMAAK?
So theMAAK is a studio, an architectural studio based in Cape Town. As you said, founded by myself, or in partnership between myself and Melvill. We kind of share, I suppose, a mutual passion for people in general. And we love to see people kind of thriving and connecting and learning from each other. And that's, I suppose, translated into a love for public buildings, or like people-orientated spaces. And that can be anything from a school to a clinic to a church to a public square, etc. Just kind of I've once heard it kind of termed as public architecture is the glue that kind of holds cities together, and that's essentially what it is for us as well, in terms of it's that all of those spaces where people come together. And yeah, we work across scales, from building kind of like clinics to kind of space making installations. As long as there's kind of the focus of people-centric architecture, then we're in. It doesn't really matter what scale for us. And we've also, as much as we work across scales, we've recently been working across mediums. We normally are within the physical realm, but lately we've been kind of experimenting with virtual space and what is publicness within virtual space and digital space, even though we're within our private realms of our houses, etc. So that's been quite fun in terms of our, all of the whole world situation of being in isolation, but how do we still connect? So that's been an expansive learning process, but yeah, super cool. And then I suppose good to mention is the context of which we work. So the areas where we find ourselves mostly working are under-resourced, with communities that are like really at risk. Unfortunately, we've had very little change since the end of apartheid, or very little spatial change within our cities. Apartheid, for those that don't know, was kind of racial segregation within South Africa. And yeah, there's been very little kind of spatial change. So areas that were under-resourced and were under-invested within those times are still kind of bearing the brunt of that. And yeah, government's trying to do their bit by contributing and starting to make projects of investment and value within all areas. But we find that the need is most dire within these lower income, under-resourced areas. And so, yeah, we see that government's trying to do their job, but because the need is so much more, we just feel that more is more in this case, and government's doing their thing, but we also can, contribute. So we kind of partner with NGOs, et cetera, to bring about more of these types of buildings. And I think in that way for us, we understand our skill set as architects, the opportunity to make buildings and make spaces, and for us, we want to be making spaces that contribute towards change, and positivity and value and betterment of our cities as a whole, and that's where we think that our skills are most suited. So yeah, that's us in a nutshell, I suppose.
So for the people, yeah.
Absolutely, for the people.
Yeah, so with that all together, though, the people and the approach to public spaces, how does that translate to you as a firm in perceiving architecture?
So I think fundamentally we see architecture as a point on a timeline, and by that I mean that we see it as a process of integrating an object of architecture into systems that already exist. So for us, it's like really important to understand what happens before the building, and what systems are there, what the stakeholders are, what the landscape is, and really try and like embed ourselves into that before we even get into architecture. But as equally as we think about before architecture, we also think about the timeline with architecture and after the building is there, like what happens to the building when we step back and leave it, what happens, who receives it, is there maintenance budget, etc. So it's quite we see architecture as an expansive thing, rather than just a point in time where the architect gets involved and then leaves. I suppose specifically public architecture we see as a tool or a method to bring about change, opportunity, usefulness, connection, healthier communities, etc. And we really think it's that kind of the typology within, or the kind of the genre of architecture where you can make a small change, but have a really big impact or kind of a really big societal reward. And I suppose that attitude also, that goes to everything that we make, in terms of even if it is a private building or a private kind of a company that's commissioning us, there's an understanding of, or the question is like, what are you giving to the city? What is that gift? As in, even though you are private on your own land, you're still part of this network that exists. In the same way that we see architecture as a really long timeline, we also see architecture as this kind of thing. It's a small piece in a big whole,
Right.
and kind of how does that all work together? There's that thinking is really aligned and supported by Grafton Architects. They did the Venice Biennale in 2018, I think. And they made the Free Space Manifesto, which really talks about kind of generosity of spirit within architecture, and how, what is that gift that, as in, you still have power within your privateness, you still have power to be giving to your surroundings, etc. So yeah, I don't know if that answers in a long way how we perceive architecture.
Yeah, but if you see it as a timeline, there's the pre, during, and post, right? Maybe architects are very much involved in the pre and the during, and then for the after, they give clues for like certain behaviors to happen, right? So it's very essential to build this kind of behavior and programs involving this community that I think will happen post building.
Yeah. Maybe if I answer that in two parts. So as much for us as we are building a building, as in a noun, we also we really try to build throughout the architectural process, as in build as a verb. As in, like, how do you build a brief? How do you build knowledge? How do you build community, and all of those things? As in, we see the entire process as an opportunity to build and to learn. This kind of links onto the Lee Idlecourt has she's the trend forecaster and one of her trend forecasts is about a labor of love, and I think there's also going to be she's setting up an exhibition also on this labor of love. But it really talks about, you know, the love for the entire process, you know, and understanding that there's labor in not only in the physicalness of making anything, whether it's a building or a kind of carpet. All that goes into it is just as beautiful as the final outcome. So the time and the effort and the repetition and the muscle, everything that goes into it is an opportunity to build. So if we go back to what you were saying about like how building buildings and building public buildings is around also building communities, definitely it's I think it's the number one. And I think if you haven't worked with and thinking about, if you haven't worked with communities or the community that will receive the building, or if you haven't thought about how they're going to be using it afterwards, I think you've kind of missed the number one joy of public building. I think, you know, in a same way that, you know, you don't build a private house without the homeowner or their brief. You know, you've got to be working with communities to build the kind of public spaces. And I think on a practical level, it really ensures ownership of space, as in when the building is finished, it really ensures that the communities receive that building as their own. And I suppose it contributes to the success of the building in the end. But I think also what that links onto is our thoughts around collaboration. And for us, we see collaboration as two parties with their inherent uniqueness coming together to make something that is completely new, that wasn't possible by themselves or possible with other parties. And with respect to communities and the work that we do in terms of architecture, I mean, I can come in with my architectural professional skill set and like how to build a building, but there's a genius of like local knowledge that I will never be able to completely understand. And so together we collaborate, as in I bring my stuff to the table, the community brings their stuff to the table, and we collaborate to make something that is completely unique, appropriate, relevant, and useful, to ensure its longevity and its value.
Yeah, I'm curious though, how do you, if it's a community project like most public spaces, how do you engage them? Because if it's a private house, then the owner would pretty much be involved in the programming of it, right? They say their needs and then they discuss with you, and it's easy because it's one-on-one.
Yes.
Yeah, but in public space, when you refer to collaboration, how do you collaborate with them?
So it's also been a learning process for us, and I think when I talk about building processes, it's always about changing things and, you know, building on from processes. So we've done a lot of learning and unlearning with regards to how do we collaborate with communities. But I think a large part of it is about listening. And then, I mean, we've run workshops where it's like 2-3 days worth of intensive kind of like meetings with different people in the community. And that will kind of range from just broad community meetings to kind of various stakeholders within the community that are kind of respected voices, etc. But I think it's so often just about like actually sitting down with people around a table and just talking, you know. That talking can be, it's useful for that talking to be kind of strategically thought through and have clear intentions around what needs to be spoken about. And I suppose also as much as getting the community around the table, it's also about getting the other people that are going to be contributing towards the building, whether it's the operational user or the patron, getting them around the same table so that everyone's on the same page in terms of what can we achieve and what are we wanting to achieve. But yeah, I mean, in practical essence, I think it's just spending time with as in we really, it's like 2-3 days within a community to really, and that's just the beginning of starting to uncover. But I think also through the process, in terms of the collaborate, that's the beginning, but through it, we'd also really like to kind of incorporate how anyone in the community can add their skill set to a building. So there was a building project that we did, which was a renovation of a space, and it basically, we made a massive curtain out of quilted kind of squares, and the quilt was made by, whoever could come in on this day and the next day from the community, as in anyone that wanted to learn a new skill and also teach each other. So like as much as possible, also trying to build into the process how people can contribute with their own hands as well. I think there's nothing more rewarding than kind of saying, this is my contribution and I can see it physically, so yeah, building in value in the process as well for people.
So creating a system that involves them also in the making process, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, that's great. And okay, so with many of your projects being public buildings and public space making projects, of course, it's essential, as we said before, to make positive social impact. Maybe first and foremost, what areas of impact do we need to pay attention to? Or maybe in your experience, what are the main ones?
So I think first of all, for us, social impact, and maybe you can also attest to this because of your background, but we see social impact architecture not as like a label, but more as a method, in the same way that kind of like, sustainable architecture has unfortunately got this kind of like green scorecard and green rating system, which is all very well, but there's genuine sustainability, and then there's stuff that's just a scorecard.
Greenwashing.
Exactly. So for us, like, it's really important to watch out for and pay attention to, are you doing the social impact stuff for a scorecard, or is it actual genuine impact, and I think for us also, that's, again, it's through the process of wherever we can, it's about integrating connection and empathy rather than just relying on the scorecard at the end. And I think a good kind of realization for us within that, because it's also still been a learning process, I'd listened to a lecture by Rahul Malhotra, I think he's an Indian architect. He was talking about within public spaces or public buildings, specifically, it was important for his firm to understand the difference, or understand the body of the client, and in public buildings, you've got your patron, who's your like financer, you've got your operational user, and then you've got the actual user. So for like an example, university is, you've got someone funding it, you've got, the staff that run it, and then you've got the actual user, who are the students. And I think with regards to that scorecard thing, I'm sure that the patron wants to know the scorecard and see the scorecard, and the operational user probably needs to have it as well to kind of, prove to the financer that they're doing well, or whatever it is. And so there's a place and time for the scorecard and the kind of the quantitative aspects of social impact, but ultimately the user, who's either the student body in the university example, or the community in like a public building example, they don't need to see the scorecard, they need the real genuine impact, So I think in terms of what we need to pay attention for is, it's just about understanding the beast that the client is, and it's made up of a whole lot of different aspects. But I mean, for us, what satisfies our hearts is about like satisfying the user, rather than the finance or the patron or the operational user. But we understand that there's importance in those. But so just not
like they shouldn't be the goal,
exactly, yeah. So let's not greenwash social impact. Let's kind of like just be genuine about, social impact.
Yeah, how do you project this out though? maybe we've kind of touched upon it, like it comes naturally, right? If you make something that's good, then the people will be happy in it. But yeah, I guess maybe this question is not valid anymore, but
No, I think it is. I think it is. I mean, it's really hard, and I think as architects, we make plans to break plans almost. And it's really difficult to kind of map out that kind of stuff. And yeah, I suppose the question is whether it's relevant or not. And I do think it's relevant for some kind of stakeholders, like the kind of the patron, etc. But I think more than kind of projecting it out, what we rely more on is having very clear intentions, and then letting the details kind of resolve themselves through that. And I think a good example for this is our design build program that we run annually called Follies in the Felt. And it's essentially the intentions that we set every year are around exploring design through design build, as in like quick making, and design, and as well as exploring genuine, unbiased collaboration with other people, because it's a 2-weekend process with kind of like plus minus 20 people. So those are the intentions, and kind of to allow those intentions to be tested, we have 2 fixes. The one is a site gets chosen, and the other is a material gets chosen. But for the rest, nothing is planned at all. And by the end of the second weekend, we always have, so far it's been like really beautiful results of not only kind of like final objects of installations, but also of like people coming together, etc. So I think that's a great example of, if you set certain boundaries of the kind of the box in which you're trying to explore, you can then, you can kind of go from side to side within that box, and in that process of going left and right in that box, you will figure out the details, etc. But I'm sure there's lots of literature on measuring social impact, and it's something that I haven't got into yet. Maybe there'll be more for me to learn if I do get into it, but it's hard to kind of have that as the goal, as you say, when for us kind of the people and the actual user is the goal.
Yeah, there is one that I know of. It's the well building standard, but I think it's more about health and well-being inside the building. So I think it's around the realm of, does this support you being healthy, but doesn't measure, I think, happiness and welfare, right? I think that's what's more important in these kind of settings.
I'd love to see, as in, that sounds very useful, the well-being standard, but a flip. Imagine how great it would be if there was like a happiness and like a usefulness standard. That would be like phenomenal, actually. Like, imagine what our projects and our processes would take on if that was something that we were working with, and maybe it's actually fundamentally about just genuine love for each other as well, what do our projects look like when we come from a place of love rather than just production or
a celebration of happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it.
But so wait, the Follies in the Field program, is it concentrated in one site or is it scattered around the city?
No, so it's been scattered around, and it's kind of been, so every year, as much as there's a collaboration between the participants and themselves, we collaborate. So we go into like a 3-month the program. We do like a intensive planning session, and we often, or actually every year, we have collaborated with different people as like facilitators, and often those facilitators have led us to the different spaces that we worked in. So the first one that we did was really just very experimental and was actually just the 3 of us to begin with. And then the second one was on a farm just outside of Cape Town, and that was via one of the people that we collaborated with. There was an amazing kind of like beautiful landscape of a forest, and we ended up building kind of a hanging canopy that was made out of agave wood. And agave is like really lightweight and kind of like balsa, if anyone is familiar with those woods. So it's kind of like a 3-meter pole that you can pick up with one hand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's really crazy. But so with that, the concept of that year's program was to have this kind of suspended in the air that was kind of like, you know, an illusion, and that was based within a forest, which was beautiful. And then the third one we did was, again, through the person that we collaborated with as a facilitator on his family farm, also just outside of Cape Town, but in quite a different setting to where the first one was. And on that farm, the material that we found in abundance was quite amazing. The farm has like certain events on the farm, like weddings and stuff. And whatever gets brought onto the farm, they, in terms of waste, they sort and collect. And so they've got like masses of like wine bottles and beer bottles and plastic and whatever. So when we saw all of these bottles, we were like, whoa, this is amazing. We'd love to use them. And the farmer was like, please use them. You know, we don't know what to do with them. So we made this like this temple pyramid of light, of green glass bottles, like shingles, which was also, again, beautiful. And again, like over a 2-weekend process, which was, it's always amazing to see like what 20 people can achieve with, you know, like clear intentions and love and passion. And then the last one that we did, which was last year, was we kind of wanted to shift from these really rural, beautiful settings to somewhere that was a lot more accessible, because we found that we were making these like cool structures, beautiful, absolutely beautiful, but then no one was seeing or appreciating or valuing them or benefiting from them. So we were like, how can we bring that to the city? And then last year we worked with a group of artists and creatives within an area called Langa, which is in Cape Town. And the site was kind of like an empty or abandoned public square that was really like historically significant in terms of apartheid, but there just was nothing there. And in terms of the material that we used there, we were very interested in, so we collaborated with this group of creatives from Langa and then another artist also from kind of the central Cape Town, and both of them had waste as their primary kind of medium. So we knew that we wanted to use waste materials again, and we just didn't know what waste material. In the end, one of the members from Langa, he'd been working with Tetra Pak, which is milk box and juice box material, which has got that beautiful like silver on the inside and then the whatever cardboard branding on the outside. And we managed to get our hands on kilometers of this stuff. We had I think, if I can remember the details correctly, we had a change in legislation around our sugar taxes in terms of what went into juices, and because of that, a lot of the juice manufacturers had to change their quantities of their volumes of their box sizes. And so this one company that we approached, they had like kilometers of the stuff of the pre-made boxes that were the wrong size.
No longer used. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So we used this Tetra Pak in this very kind of high density environment, and made these shimmering canopy things that are just kind of like otherworldly. They really are beautiful, and that's, I mean, I'm not boasting because it was a collaboration of 20 people and an idea from not even us. It was just kind of everyone sharing ideas, and this thing came about. So it's something that we're really proud of, and it was also because it was within that city environment. It was so much more aligned to who we are as a company, and kind of like, you know, bringing value to whoever needs it within the city, and bringing inspiration, etc.
the good thing is not only it supports exploring the city, like exploration of the city, but also taking ownership of the place. Yeah, post. So maybe this initiative will introduce them to being familiar and like being comfortable hanging out in these public spaces, especially, right? And then after that, the effect will be maybe forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that was the interesting thing, because every year the Follies in the Felt program it's never meant to be a permanent installation that we put in, just because, with permanence comes consequence. And but also from a point of view of making, you can't really make something over 2 weekends and then expect to last forever. But what it did was it kind of, I mean, the community that kind of walked past through that, like every day, like it gave them a new kind of understanding of their space and like a new celebration within that space. And hopefully we're really wanting that those kinds of things then prompt the city, or even the communities themselves, to kind of self-organize and say, okay, listen, we want something here, it could be so cool to have something here permanently, like what are we doing to make this really historically significant space more valuable. And it was, but I mean, even before that, it was so interesting seeing how these canopies were engaged with while we weren't there, because we left it up for like a month. And kids started using it as a jungle gym, which they obviously didn't last because they were just like stapled together, but it was part of the process as well, and to see like what people want to do in public space, like as when they were kids kind of lying on it. And I think there were people that were a little bit drunk one night hanging on it, etc. So it's also good lessons for like public space robustness that's necessary. It's also just a great opportunity to see what people want to do in public spaces, and let that inform more permanent things down the line.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think to close, in the beginning, we said that the theMAAK really loves and appreciates the process of making, right? And we kind of talked about how it stems from loving the process of getting to know the people and working in collaboration with the people. So are there other things that make you specifically enjoy the making process? Or making meaning?
Making meaning. So yeah, definitely what you've said, and good summary of what I've said as well in terms of people and connection and engagement. But I think there's, I mean, as humans, to be able to convert a kind of a thought or a feeling or an idea into something physical is quite special in itself. But beyond that, or even better than that, the life that this thing takes on through its development, which is far beyond what any of us could have planned or thought through, is like really, truly special. It's kind of like a trust between your brain, your hands, this object, and a trust in the process that the transformation and development will occur in the way that this thing needs to, develop. And yeah, it's because it's beyond what we can actually even think about and plan about, the actual physicality of this thing transforming. I think that's almost like magic, actually. That's part of the process that I think is the best for me.
Which we are secretly hoping to happen.
Yeah,
secretly, we want the unexpected.
Yeah.
Cool. But thank you so much. We did really learn a lot about. We never had someone in the public space area, so it's really great that, like the case of any other scale, that process is becoming increasingly more and more important, especially when it involves other people, because essentially we're making for them, right? And the meaning will be for them also. And the meaning also, we cannot compartmentalize them. Like we cannot know the scale of the impact that we can make. So again, there's the beauty of that uncertainty and unexpected and magic.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the last thing from me, one of the founding principles of ours is kind of, we don't know it all, and we hope never to forget that, as in, like we forever learning, that's important for us to always remember.
But yeah, so thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for having us on your show.
Thank you.